welcome to Founding Fuels 2025 in Review, our special year-end podcast series where we look back at the forecasts made earlier this year, January to be precise, and see how the world actually unfolded. We kicked off the series earlier this week with Professor Yao Yang, who helped us understand how China viewed the Trumpian reset and its ripple effects across Asia. Today, we turn the lens to the global stage and a voice that's been consistently ahead of the curve in connecting the dots between geopolitics, economics, and the future of technology. Sundeep Waslekar, president of the Strategic Foresight Group, and a very familiar face for the Founding Fuel community. When we met Sundeep in January 2025, during the World in 2025 masterclass, he painted a vivid picture of the year ahead, warning of a breakdown within the Western alliance, growing friction between the rich West and the rest, and an accelerating race for control over AI. Now, as the year draws to a close, we revisit those forecasts. What has Trump's second term done to the international order and the institutions that once underpinned it? How deep are the divisions within the West and what new alignments are emerging? And finally, where does the AI race stand today between nations seeking dominance and those trying to safeguard equity and ethics? To explore these questions, my colleague and senior journalist, Dinesh Narayanan, and the anchor for this series will be in conversation with Sundeep Waslekar. Dinesh, over to you.
Thank you, IG. Great to be here. Without much ado, I'll jump into the first question. Sundeep, great to have you here again. Last time when we spoke in January in the masterclass, one of the critical things which you pointed out was the emerging cracks in the Western alliance, and we have seen it playing out over the year. How do you assess it now towards the end of the year?
Thank you, Dinesh, and thank you, IG. It's a pleasure to be back on Founding Fuel platform. When I said in our masterclass at the beginning of the year that there would be cracks within the Western Alliance, I was looking at it at two levels. The first, the transatlantic alliance between the US and the Western Europe. There, instead of a crack, there has been a complete consolidation with Europe's subjugation, total subjugation to the United States. So Trump demanded three things from Europe. One was that they should buy American weapons, and Europeans have agreed to increase their defense expenditure to 5% of GDP, as per the NATO rules, except Spain. And the NATO rules would mean buying very modern weapons, and they are all with the US. So that condition is satisfied. The second condition Trump had was that they should buy American energy sources, and Europeans have diverted their energy supplies to import more from the US. And the third condition that Trump administration had was that they should give easy access to the American AI and other technologies, and the Europeans are going to dilute their famous EU AI Act on 19th of November, very soon, to make it easy for Americans to penetrate. So Europe has completely subjugated to the US, and there is no need for a clash or a separation. I mean, it's subjugation. America owns Europe now.
Well, you also spoke about the internal rift in the US and between the more rich Western coast and the rest of the US, and the social engineering which Trump was attempting. How do you see that now?
Well, that has got even more sharply polarized than it appeared at the beginning of the year. Very clearly, the American politics is getting more and more polarized. the Republican Party has moved further to the right. Uh, if you see the response to Charlie Kirk's assassination and what happened after that, the Democrat Party has moved further to the left, uh, with Mamdani elected as the mayor of New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez coming into the limelight, Bernie Sanders, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is maintaining his independent stance and had to succeed in some kind of a referendum in California on the boundaries of the constituencies. So the polarization is increasing at a fast pace.
Given that we've seen a sort of a swing towards the Democratic Party in the recent elections, both at all levels of the U.S. government, federal as well as state, you think do you see it as a decisive move, or do you see it as a sort of a reaction to whatever has been happening so far from the Trump camp?
I don't even see it as a swing.
Okay.
Democratic Party has had successes in the recent elections, but they were all their strongholds. New York City, California, New Jersey, and Cincinnati. Cincinnati was most interesting because there was a mayor of Indian origin who won again against the half brother of J.D. Vance. So that was quite interesting. But then he had the incumbent advantage. So that's what some people say. But other than Cincinnati, the Democrats have won in their strongholds. I wouldn't really even call it a swing. I think we have to wait and see. There are media reports saying that people are getting a little fed up with Trump's focus on foreign policy. Not only people outside the Republican Party, but even within the Republican Party, there is a strong move, and within the MAGA movement, there is a strong mood emerging against this daily theater in the White House, where Trump invites a foreign leader, and J.D. Vance and Rubio are sitting next to him, and he's several statements about various countries that he's dealing with. So therefore, there is some disenchantment within MAGA, but they're not going to go to the Democrats and vote for them. So I wouldn't really call the recent victories for Democrats in New York City or some of the other places as anything major so far. We have to wait and watch.
Right. And all of it in the background of the US China contestation, right? And that playing out globally. And how do you see it now, over 1 year after Trump's Liberation Day tariffs? And
no, I think they are finding ways to coexist. Really, you had the meeting between the two presidents in South Korea, and they seem to have worked out some kind of a working relationship. The critical factor for China is whether the US will allow any kind of technology exports to China. What I hear is that US is not allowing export of chips to China or even to many other countries. They are going to be much more heavy-handed in export of chips. So it's not China specific. Maybe a little bit more attention to China, but I believe they are doing that with many other countries. That's what I heard just yesterday. So because Trump's central focus is really to achieve technological supremacy for the American capital, for the whole world, over the whole world. And but other than that, and that they will keep negotiating, they have sorted out ways to work together, at least on a short-term basis. I'm not sure this is enduring or long-term, but probably they are not even looking for a long-term solution. Probably they're just looking at the relationship management than a conflict resolution.
Right. Which brings us to the other point, because these are all short-term measures, if at all they are short-term measures. International agreements are supposed to be enduring, But Trump has sort of upset those long-standing norms and agreements which have been in the world, and there is certain sovereign disdain for these kind of agreements. How do you see this playing out now? Would it be like newer agreements under this administration or even subsequent administrations will have more sanctity because the world order will essentially get rearranged?
Well, Trump has shown scant regard for international law and international agreements which are products of international law. He seems to be believing in ad hoc approaches, not in any kind of agreements. He's disregarding old agreements in rhetoric as well as in action. I mean, in rhetoric, when he threatens to take over Panama Canal or when he threatens to take over Greenland, or when he takes action on the issue of tariffs with a number of countries, he is basically disregarding all those agreements. So international law is being eroded very fast, and this is going to be a crisis for the long run because there is no international sovereignty. Sovereignty is only national.
Right.
And so in the international sphere, in the absence of sovereignty, you have agreements and
Yeah.
you have norms. And if you are going to weaken the regime of agreements of any kind, whether they are trade, economic, arms control, whatever, political, strategic, then basically you are wrecking the international order. And that's a very worrisome thing in the long run. Also,
Right.
what he's looking for is not any kind of durability in the negotiations he's holding, but he's looking for very short-term solutions on every front. And the rest of the world seems to be caving in.
And it's not only Trump, right? I mean, even Putin, and when you mentioned Budapest Protocol last time, whether it is Israel and Middle East, a lot of agreements have bitten the dust there. And we continue to see even, I mean, I understand that there are conflicts, and in conflicts things are fluid, but still, there seems to be no respect for even ceasefires, So, do you think this would, in fact, increase the conflicts also?
Well, Israel and its invasion of several countries in the Middle East is a very good example of how even countries other than the US, so in this case with a strong US support,
Yeah.
are breaking the international law and really disregarding it completely. Russia has exactly a counter argument. Why the Russians are not willing to sign any kind of a deal with Trump or the Europeans or with Ukrainians on the question of Ukraine, because the argument from Moscow is that Trump is wanting a ceasefire. And
Right.
they don't want merely a ceasefire. They want a longer term security agreement for Europe. And so Russia seems to be wanting a durable agreement rather than a ceasefire, which is why there has been no breakthrough on Ukraine, despite a meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska and their frequent telephone conversations.
Right.
So Russia is really presenting itself as a party that wants to abide by international law and is willing to write the new rules of the conduct of international relations, including on Ukraine. And the Chinese are also suggesting in many ways that they want a new regime of laws and agreements. They are not saying they want short-term agreements or any kind of ceasefires.
Right. The Chinese are also trying to, while maintaining that there should be multilateralism and rooting for multilateralism, they also seem to be wanting to have a newer sort of a reinvented multilateral system where their concerns and their standards and their rules are sort of accepted into or written into the existing arrangements. You think it would it has somewhat occupied the entire year as well as in the continuing period?
No, the Chinese would want that. It's obvious, but Whether they would be able to sell it to the rest of the world is a question, because they tried it before when they set up the Asian Investment and Infrastructure Bank or whatever, or Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And people started talking about, oh, Chinese are setting up their own Bretton Woods institution focused on the Chinese priorities. But it turned out that the interest rates of this AIIB are so high that most countries don't want them. Either they don't want them, or they are surrendering their natural resources to China, or even overall the Chinese interest rates are very high. So even though they are trying to introduce a new financial order, it's not going very far, because the countries don't want those kinds of loans with huge interest rates. The World Bank and the IMF worked after the 1940s for all these years, because they had strong conditionality, but their interest rates were tolerable.
Right.
And the country suddenly thought, oh, okay, the Chinese have not very steep conditionalities, we can go there. But then they found that the conditions were easy, but the interest rates are very high, the cost is very high. So, so the Chinese can wish what they want, but in the end, the world has to accept the order that they offer.
We mentioned, I mean, you talked about the Middle Eastern conflict and what Israel has done. Briefly, could you also touch upon what happened between, India, Pakistan, and what this conflict would have meant?
Well, in the Middle East, again, you have a classic example of laws and principles being thrown to the dustbin, and I'm not just talking about the Israeli invasion of Qatar or Lebanon and some of the other countries, but the most striking moment for me of this adosism and the total collapse of morality in international law was the White House welcoming the current president of Syria, who is a former terrorist, who headed a branch of Al Qaeda. They had a $10 million bounty on his head. And now they are welcoming him right in the White House.
Al-Shara.
And he is also, I mean, the Middle Easterns call him by his old name, by Al-Julani, not by his new name, Ahmad Shara. So welcoming Al-Julani in the White House, plus he had fun moments with senior military commanders. So that just shows like total collapse of morality. That means they will welcome anybody they want, just on the basis of short-term calculations. And I don't even know what they get in return, because Syria has agreed to join the Abraham Accords with Israel. But if you look at the Syrian economy, I don't know what it means in real terms. So now Kazakhstan has also joined Abraham Accords.
Kazakhstan has always had relations with Israel anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, they had, but now they are doing it as a gift to Trump, not to Israel.
Yeah.
So yeah, so basically, getting all these countries to join the Abraham Accords, what does it really mean? Because the people of Middle East are of a very different opinion, and the core of the Abraham Accords is Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and UAE building huge infrastructure connected to Israel. And I don't think it's going to be easy for them. I mean, the people will make it possible for them to build road lines and rail lines and all connecting Israel to the rest of the Arab world. It's okay for the kingdoms and for the rulers to invest billions of dollars, but if you have millions of people opposed to it, they can make it very difficult. So, so I don't know. Now, in the middle of all that, you had the India-Pakistan Operation Sindoor, the war, and then there was this mysterious Saudi Pakistan agreement on mutual security guarantees.
And also Pakistan's involvement is the so-called the Arabian Defense sort of arrangement for Palestine, or proposed ones.
Yeah, exactly. So, so more and more the Americans are looking at Pakistan from from the Middle Eastern perspective rather than a South Asian perspective.
Right.
Even though the new ambassador whom they just sworn in yesterday is ambassador to Delhi and at the same time special envoy to South Asia, and I think his geographical jurisdiction includes Pakistan. So they are kind of looking at Pakistan both from the Middle Eastern point of view as well as from the South Asian point of view, or maybe they are just confused. They are trying to define its role.
Yeah. Does it dilute the position of the American ambassador to India? That
No, it strengthens him. I mean, he strengthened.
He is strengthened, but I'm saying that from a US perspective, the State Department perspective, you instead of a dedicated ambassador to India, you also have someone with an additional responsibility of Southeast Asia.
No, they have tried this before, and in the past, India had protested and they accepted the Indian point of view. I think they tried with Richard Holbrooke, not an ambassador based in Delhi, but a special envoy for South Asia, including India and Pakistan and maybe Afghanistan. So this is a kind of reiteration of that. But here you also have the ambassador posted in Delhi at the same time. And this time, of course, India has not protested, or maybe I don't know what the diplomatic conventions are. Maybe we have to accept it as it is, because in the past we protested and they managed to. The Delhi managed to get its demand. I don't know what happens this time. No, I think the ambassador becomes more powerful with his additional hat that he has.
Okay. So, one of the questions, again, you had mentioned in the masterclass was that the defining question of the decade would be how would the West deal with autocracies and, dicey governments? I mean, you already pointed out an example of Syria, and we saw Field Marshal welcomed in the Oval Office as well, the Pakistani Field Marshal. So, what do you think now over the past 1 year? How has it played out? How has these kind of relationships, developed?
No, what we are seeing, and we may see more of that next year during the Trump presidency, is that basically institutional arrangements are giving way to ad hoc diplomacy. And my contention at the beginning of year was that there are no institutional arrangements or mechanisms in the UN or outside the UN to resolve conflicts between the big powers, especially if some of the powers involved in conflict are democracies and the others are autocracies. So say, for example, US, China, Russia. So there are no institutional arrangements. What the White House has done is that they have indicated that they don't care for institutional arrangement, they don't need it, and they are just doing ad hoc diplomacy. This is at the further cost of any kind of hope for institutional mechanisms. And this is going to make the whole international system unpredictable, because it's going to be dependent on short-term trends and short-term whims and fancies. The whole principle of having some kind of norms or some kind of rules and agreements and institutions or treaties for the conduct of international relations, the purpose is to have predictability, because you can then predict, and on the basis of that, you can conduct your international relations. But if institutional arrangements are giving way for short-term calculations and short-term negotiations, then the predictability goes with the wind. And everybody else is then forced to respond to short-term calculation. And that makes the entire international system very weak and unstable. So while it may appear stable in some moments, overall, the structure of the international system is getting fragile. And that's what happened. So basically what has happened in the course of the year, as compared to January when we met last on this platform, is that we are now facing the crisis of international institutions. much more severely than we did at the end of last year. And we are facing the crisis of international morality much more severely than we did. So we have our institutions in jeopardy. You have morality almost collapsing, and the other crisis we are having is the crisis of technology. So we are facing this triple crisis, uh, 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 and they all become much worse. While on the surface, some short-term gains in terms of stabilizing relationships and stabilizing international environment and ending conflicts, but they're not ending. And ceasefire for the ending conflicts, short-term ending conflicts, and they have been achieved.
Right. You mentioned technology is one of the things which is going to create issues internationally as well. And clearly, you've been writing extensively and speaking extensively on artificial intelligence. How do you? What have you seen during the year? You've been having extensive conversations with leaders in AI as well globally. What have you been seeing so far?
I think there is a
And particularly, especially at the high end level, not at the LLM or the other levels, because that's the main.
No, I think there is a more and more acceptance that AI is moving towards what is called artificial general intelligence or superintelligence. There is a debate about how long will it take, whether it takes 3 years or 5 years. That's the question.
Right.
Almost all scientists as well as promoters of big AI companies like OpenAI and XAI or
Meta,
Google on the
Google.
Anthropic on the American side, and Baidu, DeepSeek, Alibaba on the Chinese side, they are all convinced that this is where AI is going. So from LLMs now we are into agentic AI, and also very high speed progress towards robotics AI in East Asia, in Japan, China, and Korea. So you are going to go to robotics AI, which is called physical AI. So you will see agentic AI, physical AI, and a lot of efforts being made for the self-replication capability and self-evolution capability of AI algorithms. So there is a progress on self-evolution, not on self-replication. But a lot of people think that that's where it will finally go. Sorry.
And quite a bit of progress in quantum computing as well. We saw Google's Willow chip sort of perform at 30,000 plus times.
Yeah, there is, but it's still far. Quantum is that at the experimental level. But basically, there is a big technology race going on with a focus on AI and quantum computing. Quantum is a little behind, but that will catch up in the next few years. And this is going to have severe socio-economic consequences. But if you are looking at...
Is regulation catching up with the progress in technology?
No. In fact, Europe is going to decide in the next 10 days to backroll on some of the regulation. But what I've been hearing from the technology leaders in the US is that they are not keen on the regulation on the kind of AI that exists today, because that regulation is aimed at DEI. And Trump very openly talked against DEI, that diversity, equality, and inclusion. So they are against that, and EU regulation is for DEI. So they are against that, but they are very open-minded on regulation for future threats of AI.
Okay.
So the four extreme threats are in the future. One is out of control, out of human control. Second, large-scale manipulation. Third, enabling of biological and chemical weapons. And fourth, bypassing the cybersecurity completely. So these are the four big threats of AI in future. And for that, they are open. In fact, one of these four, which is the biological and chemical weapon capability empowerment by AI, that's already Trump announced in his AI action plan of July 21. that he's not going to tolerate it. And once he announced it as a part of the official American AI action plan, there is no way that the AI companies would have any other kind of a thought. In fact, this happened because around that time, one of the AI models of OpenAI showed capability to produce biological weapons. And the Grok 4 showed the capability to help a terrorist or anybody who wants synthesized chemical weapons. And immediately OpenAI rolled back on this. But the fact that they rolled back still means they have the capability. Right. And a higher model will have the capability. But out of the 4 threats which are being discussed at the higher end of the AI debate, there is already a consensus and a presidential proclamation from Donald Trump that the biological chemical is out of question. I think the other 3 also, they're very open-minded. So there will be AI regulation which will be aimed at these other 3 threats. But they don't know what kind of regulations, because many formula are being discussed, but they think that some of these formula are not really durable, that there will be ways to bypass the constraints that might be posed on them. So there is a big call for pausing any progress towards superintelligence. Right. Something like 75,000 people have already signed this call from around the world, including many Nobel laureate scientists and various celebrities like Prince Harry and his wife, and so many other people, including some people from the MAGA movement. So who are not that influential, but they are identified with the MAGA movement. Steve Bannon, former chief of staff at the White House, right, no longer influential. So all these people are calling for total ban on superintelligence until some kind of global governance rules are framed. Now, what's interesting about Donald Trump, what I found one of the most interesting things that happened in the year, that Trump exhibited a very ad hoc short-term approach to everything he did, except one. That when he announced the America's AI action plan on July 23, that was the only decision which was well considered. So in January, he announced that he plans to have a new action plan by the end of July, and he called for general public and industry representatives, civil society representatives, scientists to give him memorandums on what they would like to see in this action plan, right, or policy. And he got 7,500 inputs by the end of March. And then from the end of March to the end of July, his team studied them. And I know from some of the people who send the inputs that these were not ignored, that some of the critical ideas were actually included. So, right, so it's interesting that this is the only policy which the White House has announced this year, which was well considered in an era when everything else was ad hoc, and that itself is significant.
Well, with that silver lining, I'm going to hand it over to IG to end this conversation.
Thank you, Dinesh, and thank you, Sundeep, for those deep insights into how 2025 has kind of impacted the global order. Listening to you now, it's striking that many of the themes that you spoke about in January, whether it's the deep divides that were opening up in the West, the breakdown of the international order, or the acceleration in the technology AI race, they're no longer distant possibilities, but they're actually part of our everyday reality in some ways. And I'm sure there'll be more on offer as the rest of the year rolls out. And for listeners who missed it, you can catch the first episode in this podcast series, the conversation with Professor Yao Yang on China and the Trumpian reset on foundingfuel.com. You'd find the recordings and the key takeaways. So this has been 2025 in review, a Founding Fuel series reflecting on how our predictions stacked up against the real world. I'm Indrajit Gupta. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode.